That's good, to try to get 500 of you to sit down. That's fabulous. So well done, well done. We highly recommend that you continue the networking exercise through the entire day every time we put you on break. Now let's get started with our first presentation this morning. The Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. The primary spirit behind the architecture is one of praise. This is not a story of people brought down, but of people who overcame and helped to transform a country. This magnificent example of excellence in dimensional storytelling unfolds the African American experience. Moments of introspection and the pain of the past, stories of resilience, joy, hope, inspiration, and commitment. The Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture is a reconciliation and experience that will sing for all of us, a place in history, an attraction for the ages. Please welcome, from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, Bryan Sieling, Chief of Design, and Deirdre Cross, Director of Public Programs. Please, a huge round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are we on here? Okay, good. Well, thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. We are thrilled to be here and so honored to be a recipient of your Thea Award this year. For those of you who have been to the museum, you'll know that it is quite a remarkable place, and we're very proud to be able to talk with you about it today and show you some of the highlights of how the museum was developed, and then offer you an opportunity to have some questions. So I'm going to start, because of my background in design, I'm going to start, my focus is going to be on the design inspiration behind the building itself, the design of the exhibitions, and how the two were coordinated to become one for a unified and cohesive experience. Dierdre is going to talk about how we use that wonderful building and engage our public through public programs and special events. So let me get started. First, I'd like to begin with a short film created for us by Cortina Productions, which will give you an overview of the museum itself in video format, and then we'll go through some slides to look at the individual aspects of it. So.
We must tell the story, 400-year story of African American contribution to this nation's history.
It must tell the unvarnished truth that will have moments to make one cry or to ponder the pain of slavery and segregation. Today, a dream too long deferred is a dream no longer. This wonderful bronze corona danced wonderfully with the other buildings on the mall.
What we can see of this building, the towering glass, the artistry of the metalwork, is surely a sight to behold. After you reflect on the immortal declaration that all men are created equal, you can see a block of stone where day after day, men and women were bought and sold and bid like cattle.
Ain't gonna let nobody love. Tell me right, tell me right.
We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again. I think that nonviolence is fine, but I don't think it can ever go far enough.
Yes, this museum tells small and large humiliations of a whites-only sign, but it also tells the story of black and white youth sitting so full of dignity on those lunch counter stools.
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Even today, the journey toward justice is still not complete. But this museum will inspire us to go farther. Great nation does not hide its history. It faces its flaws and corrects them.
When our children look at the plane flown by Tuskegee Airmen, I want them to see how ordinary Americans could do extraordinary things.
We remember so all who encounter the museum will understand American history through an African American lens.
Hey, you all ready for your trip down south? I know your grandma will be just thrilled to see you, but you need to be careful on the road. Old Jim Crow won't let people like us stop just anywhere. So let's make sure you got everything you need. Child, you better make sure you got pillows and blankets so you can get some rest in that car. There's not a lot of motels on the road that'll let color folks spend the night.
We don't allow no colors in our restroom. You either hold it, no one sells as far as I'm concerned.
That meal doing it for you? Good, good. Glad to hear it. The Green Book brought you here, right? That book does serve a good purpose, and I'm proud to be in it.
The museum showcases the talent of some of our finest Americans. The galleries celebrate not only African American equality, but African American greatness.
Obama.
You'll find things large and small. You'll find things that'll make you smile, like Chuck Berry's Cadillac. Or you'll be amazed at Michael Jackson's fedora.
We have shown the world we can float like butterflies and sting like bees, steal home like Jackie, rock like Jimmy.
Visitors who go through this museum, they will be changed. The African American story has profoundly shaped who we are as Americans.
As long as there is the United States of America, now there will be a National Museum of African American History and Culture. See what a dream can do.
Thank you so much. That says a lot right there, that film. It really covers the emotional and quality and historical significance of what we've been able to accomplish at the museum. So at this point, I would like to go through the slides and talk to you a little bit about the architecture, about the exhibitions. Again, you're familiar with the shape of the building. It's a three-tiered, what we call corona, the portion of the building that's above ground. And it houses 3 levels of galleries within that. We also have galleries below grade, which we'll show you. The corona itself was inspired by this artifact. You may have seen it in the video we just looked at. It's an architectural feature called a caryatid. It's a porch column in the form of a human figure. And this particular one is from southwest Nigeria, created by the Yoruba people. And so obviously the building itself is inspired by the upper portion of this particular sculpture. The building is also inspired by by uplifted arms. All right. So this shape also forms that corona shape. So that combined was the architect David Auger's inspiration for the shape of the building itself. This is one of his early sketches of the building. I should go back no, sorry. You'll see in this particular image, the angle of the corona is exactly the same angle as the top of the Washington Monument, which is 17 degrees. So a little subtle little correlation there that you may not immediately get. The corona itself is clad with 3,500 cast alloy panels in a very intricate pattern. That pattern is actually derived from ornamental ironwork created by slaves in Charleston and New Orleans. And what architect David Auger did was he took an ornamental gate, an actual artifact, and he plotted the intersecting points on that gate. Then he took those points and reinterpreted them in a modern pattern. And that's what forms the pattern of the panels, individual panels that make up the corona. So what we have then is a building that's a amalgamation of African and African American inspiration, which is what forms what you see when you drive by. This is a close-up of one of the panels itself. And once you're inside the building, it creates this beautiful light pattern cast on the floor. It's just a pleasure to move up and down through the building through our circulation balconies. The panels also form or serve sort of a sustainable building aspect to our structure. The panels are in varying degrees of opacity. So on the south side of the building, where we're getting the greatest heat exposure, the panels are more closed down. And on the north side of the building, where we actually want that heat exposure, the panels are more open. Now, it's not monolithic. They're sort of mixed around together. But this is a feature that helped us gain our LEED gold status that we just received. So we're very proud of that. Our site is a modest 5-acre site located on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., just across the street from the Washington Monument. And do I have a pointer here? I'll put a show up there. But in the lower left-hand corner is the Washington Monument. You can see how close we are. Another feature of the building that the architect was very keen on was providing visitors with a sense of the city that they're in while they're touring through the building. A lot of museums you go into, once you're inside the galleries, there's no view to the exterior. You could be in any city, really anywhere. So as you move through this particular building, David has created these what we call lenses. They're views from within the building to the exterior landscape and the city beyond. So here's an example of, in our military history gallery, we created a vertically shaped lens that was aligned to perfectly frame the Washington Monument as you're standing in that gallery. And it looks beyond, of course, beyond the Washington Monument is Arlington Cemetery in the distance. So that was a logical place for us to place our military history gallery. So the exhibition team and the architectural team worked together to try to coordinate the content itself with the architectural features of the building. So on a content side, for many years, curators, educators, designers all met to go through the process of figuring out what is our content, what are we going to present to the public. And so this simple bubble diagram here really represents thousands of meetings and years of discussions on distilling it down to 3 simple messages: history, community, and culture. By the time we were developing this, the architectural plans were also emerging themselves. So for example, we knew we were going to have a main central hall. We knew we were going to have a cafeteria. We knew we were going to have certain things. But they were still in a stage where it was malleable as far as the architect was concerned. So once we settled on this structure of history, community, culture, Then we began to figure out how is that actually going to fit into the emerging plans of the building itself. And so we worked with the exhibition design firm of Ralph Applebaum Associates out of New York, and they drew this sort of logo plan of history, community, culture. And we kind of adopted this phraseology, rooted in history, embraced by community, and celebrating culture. And so as people experience the building, they all tend to want to start with history, and we encourage that because that really is the foundation of everything that they're going to see and learn beyond that. Community talks about African American resilience in the face of segregation and disenfranchisement, and the theme of that floor is making a way out of no way. When you get to the top floor of the building, the fourth floor, it's the culture galleries, and that's where the party is. That's where the celebration is. It's art, music, dance, culture, architecture, theater, television, and so forth. So when you actually look at a cross-section of the building itself, now you can see how history, community, culture fit in to the plans of the building. We also have, just below the community gallery, a floor we call Explore More, which includes a family history center, it includes an interactive gallery, it includes classrooms. And so that's a place that brings all three galleries together in a more interactive way. So once we were able to sort of parse this out and coordinate between exhibition designers and architects, we had a plan that we all felt really good about and we could move forward with. I should point out, too, that the original plans of the building, this is really not showing up. So just above the red word history, you can draw a straight line across the top. That was the history galleries. History galleries were just one level. It was the exhibition design team that proposed that we dig down an extra 2 levels to create a 3-tiered high space because of the content. We had so much content we wanted to include. We had an 80-foot-long segregated rail car. We have an airplane. We have a slave cabin. We have a log house. We have a guard tower from Angola prison. We had a lot of large artifacts. We still had a lot of smaller artifacts, too, and a big story to tell. So this was an example of where the exhibition planning really informed the architectural planning. And it was such a compelling proposal that we proceeded forward with it. So now what I like to do is just to quickly go through and show you some examples of the finished exhibitions that are in the museum. When you come into the history galleries, you take an additional elevator down 30 more feet, and then you work your way back up to the level you started through a series of ramps. So this is the beginning of the history galleries, slavery and freedom, and this is an area we call the Middle Passage, which talks about the leg of the transatlantic slave trade from West Africa to the New World. We get into, after we get through the transatlantic slave trade and colonial North America, we get into, and through the Revolutionary War, we get into the founding of America. And here's where you go from the low ceiling of the first level, you come out into this soaring high space of 3 levels high in the founding of America, and the paradox of liberty. Where a country that was founded on freedom, but not all were free. And so we talk about that paradox as you move through the Slavery and Freedom Gallery. Here we see the slave cabin in the distance. This is from Edisto Island, South Carolina, which we collected, took apart piece by piece, cataloged it, put it back into the museum piece by piece. And so it's a reconstruction of that using original material and, of course, replacing that material which couldn't be salvaged just because of time. Here you can see a log house on the next level up, just to the left of it, and the 60-foot high space that we're in at the moment. So working up from slavery and freedom to the next level of the history galleries, which is about segregation, the era of segregation, we have a Tuskegee Airman airplane hanging here. This airplane was found by a local airplane collector out here in California. We're just going to restore it and fly it around, and his buddy looked at the serial number and noticed what it was, he said, "You have a national treasure here." And once he realized what he had, he restored it to the original markings of the Tuskegee Airman Trainer airplane and donated it to the museum. He flew it all the way across the country, and at each landing on its way to Andrews Air Force Base in DC, there was a ceremony, local ceremony, and when it finally landed at Andrews Air Force Base, we had gathered together all the living Tuskegee Airmen and had a dedication ceremony there for them. So they all signed the luggage compartment door, and that's on display in one of our cases. At the end of each of the 3 galleries that make up the history section, we have what's called a reflections area. Each gallery includes a booth where you can go in and sit down and close the door and record your thoughts and feelings based upon what you've just witnessed in the gallery. So we have this 3 opportunities to do this as you move through the history galleries. And in our first year alone, we collected 24,000 video recordings. And I think now, after a year and a half, we're just over 35,000. So people are quite moved by what they've seen in the history galleries and are imparting many times just thank you for doing this. This museum is such a long time coming. Or they will impart personal experiences from their own family. And particularly when you get into the later years of the history galleries where you have actual first-person experiences of perhaps segregation, those stories can be told in this format. So it's has been quite interesting and moving, really, to listen to all these videos that we've been collecting. It's been quite successful. I mentioned earlier that we have an 80-foot-long segregated rail car in the history galleries. Yes, this was a rail car that had a separate section for colored, in air quotes, and whites. And it was given to us by a donor who is a rail car aficionado. And it was in pretty tough shape when we got it. It's been fully restored and then brought into the museum. And so I wanted to show you just a little bit about the process of bringing that into the museum. It was originally restored in Kentucky, at a facility in Kentucky, and then it was brought to DC on a flatbed. Of course, that was a very big day for us because it required street closures and so forth, which is, street closures are nothing new to DC, but it is a complicated process to get that done. So this came in under police escort. It had to come all the way from Kentucky and get permits through every single state and make sure it could go through and under all the bridges that it was going to have to go through. So that was a big job to get that done. And then eventually it came the time to lift it up and put it into the building. It required 2 500-ton cranes to lift it. And those 500-ton cranes were very close to the edge of a 60-foot drop into our site. So the engineers were especially concerned about not only the weight of the cranes themselves, but the weight of the rail car in addition to that, and its closeness to our building and our foundation wall. And so at the last minute, right before the cranes were set up, they recalculated and they did some more numbers, and they felt better about moving the cranes another 20 feet or so away from the building wall. So that kind of changed things a little bit, which you'll soon see. But what's interesting here is that right now the cranes are between the building site and the street on which the rail car was positioned. They have to turn 180 degrees now and drop it into this pit. And how do you do that? Well, very carefully. This is an example. This is an image that tells me that crane operators earn every penny that they get. They actually had to create they had to turn the car perpendicular to the site and create kind of thread their own needle, so to speak. And once they were able to thread that needle, then they could open back up again and become parallel to the actual building. So these 3 slides all took about, I don't know, 4 hours or so to get from that point to this point. And then it could be lowered into the building. The problem was, by moving those cranes 20 feet away from the site, we now no longer could put the rail car exactly where we wanted to in the exhibit. So what had to happen now is we had to set up all of this cribbing that you see here, and we had to create a way to move the rail car horizontally once it was in the building through this hydraulic gurney that you see here. And so then the rail car was picked up and through hydraulics was shifted horizontally. So how am I doing on time here? Then it was put in a big wooden box so we could build the roof over the building. Then the roof got done and the box came off, and you see it now in its final place. All right, so moving to the Segregation Gallery, in the background here you see a concrete guard tower. This came from Angola Prison in Louisiana, began as a slaveholding plantation, then became a private prison, then became a state penitentiary. So this is from the 1930s or 1940s period. It's an abandoned portion of the prison. It's an 18,000-acre agricultural prison, and this particular camp was abandoned, and we acquired the guard tower to put in our segregation gallery. Here you see our interactive lunch counter, which you saw in the video. At the end of the history galleries, we have what's called a contemplative court. This is a place to go of peace and reflection once you've experienced 45,000 square feet of some pretty difficult history. And so this has been a beautiful place for people to go and rest and reflect, have a bite in our cafeteria before they go upstairs to the community and culture galleries. So moving upstairs quickly is our Making a Way Out of No Way gallery. We have examples of all kinds of individuals who have led the way in making a way out of no way. In this particular case, Muhammad Ali was one of those. This is our military gallery. Military, not as a military history museum, but military under the umbrella of making a way. Same for sports. Sports not as a sports museum, but sports as a way to make a way. Images from our Power of Place exhibition, which looks at 10 different locations around the country where place has particular meaning to the African American community. This happens to be Oak Bluffs community on Martha's Vineyard. We have a Bronx Park Jam featured. May Reeves Hat Shop from Philadelphia is featured. So these are examples of places that have special meaning. And then the top floor, as I said before, this is where the celebration is. This is the Cultural Expressions Gallery. It has a 360-degree film that wraps the space, and exhibitions and below it that look at dance and movement and artisanry and architecture and literature and spoken word, that kind of thing. Our Taking the Stage Gallery looks at theater, film, television, and stand-up comedy, African American contributions. This is the film section. Of course, you saw Chuck Berry's Cadillac in the film. This is our Musical Crossroads Gallery, which looks at, I think it's maybe 20 different genres of music over time. And who could pass up George Clinton's Mothership? Great artifact to have. All right, we're getting close here. And finally, our Visual Arts Gallery. So I'm going to hand it over at this point to Deirdre Cross, who's going to talk about public programs and education effort and how we use the building. This is just some pictures in the interactive gallery. So, Deirdre.
Thank you, Bryan. Well, I do direct the Public Programs Unit of the museum's Education Department, and I'd have to say that the museum is an exceptional setting to present public programs. In fact, we try to use as much of the museum as absolutely possible. So and one of our themes really is to talk about how we make the ordinary extraordinary. So what you see here is a wonderful in-gallery experience that we offer during public programs, particularly during Community Day, where we have here a puppeteer, an educator, with his creation, Docent Lily. and she's actually talking to visitors about what looks to be a simple shawl and Bible, but this actually belongs to Harriet Tubman. And this particular shawl was gifted to her by Queen Elizabeth at the turn of the 19th century. And that Bible is one that Harriet Tubman, the abolitionist, and I would suggest one of the country's first feminists, is one that she used for most of her life. And we think that this is that setting is a wonderful opportunity to teach people more about the nearly 40,000 objects, iconic objects that we have in our collection. But there are times when our public programs, and they serve communities from 2 years old to much older than that, we move to different parts of the museum to present author discussions and discussions from some of the country's foremost public intellectuals. So this enables us to have kind of a town hall meeting, and we can comfortably seat 1,000 people to participate in these programs. And then, in closing, this is what we do in our 350-seat theater. This was one of our first public programs, and was the first time we ever raised a curtain on anybody. And you can see from their faces, it was quite a delightful experience.
Dierdre, yes, we are out of time,
Okay.
but I know we'll have several opportunities during the day to ask you additional questions.
Sure.
Please, a huge round of thank you to Bryan and Dierdre. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.